Hello everyone. Hello and welcome.
Morning, morning. Morning.
We are recording and we are live and welcome everyone. So feel free to say hello, introduce yourselves in the chat. Use this as an opportunity to network, to get to meet each other and ask any questions that you have so we can answer them as we go.
Great.
So I'll just give a couple of minutes for people to tune in, to join, to say hello. So feel free to use a chat to introduce yourselves and share what prompted you to join, what you were expecting out of this event. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that so we can make sure that we answer all of your questions and we tailor this for you to make sure that you get the most out of this time.
Seems quite apt that we're joined by two AI note takers as well, Evelina and Evelina.
Yeah, I think soon we'll all have a double identities, right? One real
Yeah,
one and another
yeah.
one
Our
agent
agents, exactly.
on
Yeah,
our behalf, taking notes and
yeah.
giving prompts.
Hmm.
Well, but this time, me and Perry, we are still real people here,
Yeah.
having real conversations, and we'll try to make this as human as possible, as I think those real human spaces are really shrinking in the world where everything is automated and AI generated. So, yeah, we're glad to have you all here, and we hope that you're going to participate in the conversation and debate with us. So, welcome everyone. Okay, all right. So, shall we get started? We encourage you to share your thoughts, comments, questions. Feel free to unmute ourselves as well and have a conversation with us if you like. Just obviously bear in mind that we are recording this, so we will be sharing recording with those who couldn't attend. So if you're okay with that, you are welcome to as well join the conversation and have a chat with us. Okay, so what are we up to today? So how to improve human performance in the age of AI. We've been having those conversations with Perry. We've been delivering some shared projects, and we can see what a pain it is for many people and how HR is struggling to navigate this change, how business leaders are struggling to deliver performance both from the business perspective and to make sure that they're getting the best out of people who are now feeling stressed and afraid and uncertain. So we thought, well, why don't we go live and have this conversation and invite people to have this debate with us in a way and provide a little bit of support. So I'm sure you don't need much introduction to Perry. I'm really glad that he's here, that we can do some work together. And we have very different yet complementary approaches to this because my background is much more in human change and human behavior, while Perry's approach is much more from systems and transformation at the systemic level, right? So we can look at
Yeah.
this, at the same issue from very different angles and look at it, what this means for
Mm.
HR as a system, as a whole, as an organization, and what does this mean for humans?
Mm.
So, yeah, Perry, anything that you want to add before we dive in into the topic and get started?
Thank you. Yes, Evelina, I think you're right. There's a human and systems perspective here because being in a people professional role for 23 years, people say, "Oh, you're a people person." I'm like, "Well, actually, people can be a bit awkward." So actually, I'm more interested in the systems that people are in and then people within those systems, both that we shape them and that we're shaped by them. So yeah, I'm really interested in that. And then when it comes to AI, I am obviously thinking about the impact on human beings because we're already seeing things like deep fakes and what do you believe and all that kind of thing. But it isn't just the individual application of it. I'm thinking, what impact will it have downstream into the systems and the flow of work and how we make decisions and so on. So I'm fascinated by, I guess you'd say, the sort of mechanics of it as much as I am the emotions of it, but I'd sort of defer to you on things like the emotions of it. But the two are really strongly interplayed, aren't they? So I think we can't talk about AI without people kind of getting a bit frightened and shut down. So I know there's an emotional reaction, but then when we say this isn't about fixing people, it's about fixing the system, you can see that there's a sense of relax that comes into that, like, oh, all those things that don't work, we might be able to make them work. It's like, well, yes, that might be now more possible. So I come at it from that angle, Evelina. So yeah, thanks for the sort of shape of that.
Yeah,
Cheers.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what can you expect from this event? So, we'll start with an overview of all of these big global shifts that are shaping people strategy, that are shaping HR, that are shaping human performance at work. And we will look at what this really means for our systems, what does it mean for our leadership, and what does it mean for individual human beings working in that system. We will then look at what this means for HR and how HR need to adapt to drive that human performance and organizational performance in this new world of AI. And we'll go through little process of steps of how do we then improve that human performance at work. And again, we look at this both from that individual perspective that I will share, and then Perry will share much more organizational, systemic,
Mm.
strategic approaches to that.
Mm.
We will touch on some examples that we are seeing from our work to see what works, what no longer works, what we need to do differently, and some kind of best and worst practices that we are observing. And we'll, of course, share further resources and support for you. Before we go to the resources, I'd actually like to check in. How are you all today? Because I think we go through this change, we go through so much uncertainty, and people feel overwhelmed, scared, uncertain, and it's not our fault. It's just that the world we live in today are actually so far away from how we have evolved as human beings. So my approach is much more evolutionary and looking at if we are looking to restore human performance and human well-being and health and prosperity of us as humanity, how can we actually go back to being more human? And we need to start with checking in with ourselves and reflecting on what are we today? What do we need from this day, from ourselves, from others, to make sure that we can be the best that we can be. So, you're welcome to share. Would anyone would like to reflect on where you're at?
I'm
How you're
putting mine in the chat.
feeling?
I'm putting mine in the chat, Evelina. But I'm happy to talk to it and then see what other people think.
Yeah,
So
go, Perry.
I
Go.
am
Let's
definitely
start.
in that. I call it the Friday slide feeling because it does feel like you kind of slide out of the week and slide into the weekend. And I wanted to just sort of acknowledge how nice it is at a weekend to have that quieter feel to it so that you're not bombarded by calendar invites and constant email traffic and so on. So it is a bit of a digital detox, but I also like a weekend to just kind of do what I want to do when it's looking like work, but it's me taking control of things I want to read or design or sketch out and so on. So it's not that I don't ever switch off. I just like the space and the quietness. So I'm feeling that. I'm feeling like, right, Friday, the one last push. And then the weekend comes in quieter. And then I feel like I control the tempo and I can decide what I want to do. And then in terms of what I'd need from today, I think the word comprehension came to mind, right? How can we comprehend some of these things, even if we haven't done them yet or put them to action, and we perhaps don't quite have enough information? What can we look for to comprehend things today? That's what I'm almost sensing for this. So that's my start, Evelina. Thank you.
Great, great. So I'm just checking comments and reflections. Um,
Ed's in the
right.
office, away from
So yeah,
Charlton.
Feel free as well to unmute, guys, and say hello and just see where
Right.
you're at, how you're feeling, what you're reflecting on today, and what do
Yeah.
you need out of this session.
Good.
So it is great. Well, Ed's saying
Mm,
having a Friday in the office
mm,
away from childcare.
mm,
So it's good to have that space and have a little bit more of dive into this topic. So thank you. So feel free to participate in the chat, share. We will be answering your questions as we go. So pop them in and we can dive into that. Um, yeah, how am I feeling? I think mixed in some way, because I think the world that we're living in, it's exciting in many ways. It can create a lot of opportunities. It can create a lot of new things emerging that haven't existed yet. And it's the pace of change that are at the same time is creating a lot of fear and uncertainty. So I'm at the moment supporting a lot of organizations who are struggling with their high performers not performing anymore and facing a lot of mental health issues and some personal challenges and needing to kind of restore that performance. And again, hence the event here today, that we can look at how can we do that and how we can all contribute to taking away that pressure from people, taking away pressure from ourselves to have a little bit more clarity, and have a little bit more easier um, way of approaching this chaos with a bit of hope that actually whatever is happening, however stressful it might be, it is actually a good thing if we know how to approach it and if we know how to deal with this.
yeah. Like that.
Okay, so we're not going to wait till the very end to share with you some free gifts that we promised. So if anyone needs to leave earlier and so on, you can make sure that you have that. So we'll share a free guide of the future of people strategy. So it's much more in depth on the topics that we're discussing today, overviewing the global shifts, overviewing the role of HR, overviewing processes and strategic steps to navigate all of that complexity and change. So it's yours. It will be emailed to you to the email address that you have signed up for the event. And I know that this conversation can be quite generic, and me and Perry will try to answer all of your questions, but we are also between us offering you a strategy call with either you, Perry, with me, with
Yep.
both of us, if you like, to explore what are specific challenges that you would like to discuss with us. That might be confidential and you don't necessarily want to share here, but whatever challenges that you are experiencing that you feel are limiting your performance right now at work, we are offering you that conversation to explore and see if there are options of support that we can send your way. So, yeah, feel free to book in that call in our calendars, and we will do our best to help and guide you to resources and support. Okay, so that out of the way, let's get started.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of a busy slide. You don't have to feel like you have to read all of it. These are really more just pointers for me and Perry to discuss what is really happening in a world today that are shaping people's strategy, that are shaping the future of HR, and that are shaping the future of work. Um, Feel free, guys, as well to drop in a chat any specific direction that you would like us to dive into, because we will not be going into each and every one of them. We will just discuss this generically, but we can dive into more of the topics that you would like to hear. So feel free to let us know which one you would like us to dive into. So, Perry,
Yeah.
I know we had many conversations about this already, right?
Yeah.
Looking at all of the noise
Mm,
and all of the chaos that is happening right now, politically, economically, and how is this affecting the workforce? So,
hmm
which of those you feel would be a good place for us to start, and what we need to be,
Yeah.
we can dive in.
I could almost be predictable and talk about dynamic org structures, and as Ed's just said, the decentralized leadership and decision making, because I've probably spent about 20 years looking into that.
Mm.
And there is just a quick thing I'll do just to close that off, but then I'll go to another area really, which is it's probably never been more likely that the advent of technology that automates work and perhaps elevates people's contributions needs a very different paradigm for both org structures and decision making and leadership. However, what we're also seeing is this snap back to the kind of dominant dictatorial boss role. We see it in the return to office situations, and of course, we see it in geopolitical. So it almost feels like it's the last roll of the dice of those autocrats and those dominant forces, because what tech does is it kind of disaggregates and disintermediates a lot of what we've had. So there's a lot of worry about things like the middle layer of organizations, like will you need it, or will we have sort of algorithmic based work allocation and you don't need all that coordination? So there's a lot to be done in that one. But I think I will look at the whole sense of individual autonomy actually within this,
Mm.
because there's some things going on, I think, where people are struggling to see perhaps what work will go away from them in their work. So therefore, it's almost like, well, am I just going to have to let that go and then my job dissolves in front of my very eyes? But this is an incredible opportunity actually for you to start to think about how can I harness AI and automation to actually help my performance, to actually help my future capabilities. And shorten learning curve so I can get really quickly hot on something that's only just emerged. So, the take up rate of chatbots like GPT and Copilot has exceeded any form of technological introduction from things like, iPhones and internet and so on. And that's partly because we're digital savvy and got the infrastructure more, but also because I think there's just this sense that we've now got an interface that we can utilize wherever we are in whatever shape and form we want. And I saw some recent use on AI from an individual sense, right? So again, this talks to the autonomy side of things. What do you use it for? And the 2024 to 2025 shift was, kind of learn stuff and get some answers. The 2025 shift was almost using it as a therapeutic outlet to help it make sense of complex emotional things. And you kind of think, wow, why would you outsource that to a bot? Well, I think some of the research on this tells us it's non-judgmental. It's quiet, it's secretive, it can be probed how you want to probe it. It helps you make sense by giving labels to things and then the background of the research to it. So I would say that if we've got an emotional kind of turmoil, we can use it as an intellectual settling opportunity to then understand how to better manage that emotional turmoil. But I also think it's our capability tool in our pocket. It's our little Swiss Army knife to go, right, my work looks like this. I can see what is rule-based and algorithmic and will go away from me. But I also have to play with these complex things, with these behavioral challenges, with these issues. And you could help it to almost craft future learning and development directory and so on. So I do think we underestimate sometimes the individual autonomy piece that I think these kinds of devices give us. And if organizations think that they are rolling out and replicating AI and there's a very structured format to it, it's not at all. It is quite literally a discovery, a sandpit, a playpen, a sparring partner. It's all those things. So we might as well just be upfront and say, yes, let's do more of that. But let's see what we can do to aggregate that into something really helpful for both your performance, our performance, and the overall sense of what we're here to do. So I'm going to pull that individual autonomy thing because I don't think that gets talked about enough in the AI world. It all feels like AI is being done to us. But I think we can claim it as a powerful tool if we're very smart and deliberate and persistent in using it. So I'll start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I love that, Perry, because I think it all starts with individuals, and a lot of us are afraid about feeling that, our job's going to be taken away. But this
Yeah.
is really about making sure that we can add value in different ways. And it's going back
Mm,
to each individual to say, how are you adding value now to this organization? And
yeah.
we are no longer on our own. We have, entourage of, PhD level information
Yeah.
and research
Yeah.
and intelligence at
Yeah.
our fingertips. But
Yeah.
yet it's our responsibility and our accountability to
Yeah.
give a direction, to shape
Yeah.
these ethical concerns, right? So you can look
Yeah.
at um, AI can tell you what to do and can give you information, but it can't shape the direction of why are we doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It can't have this ethical judgment, and
Yeah.
accountability and responsibility of how you're using that information and how you're applying that.
Yeah.
So the responsibility really goes back to the individual, and
Yeah.
it gives you a lot of freedom and autonomy. And people want more individual approach to work. People
Mm.
want freedom and autonomy to work how they want, from where they
Yeah.
want, when they want, right? And
Yeah.
tapping into that technology can give us a lot of that freedom where you can
Yeah.
have, your agents,
Yeah.
assistants, and so
Yeah.
on doing work
Yeah.
for you on your
Yeah.
behalf when you step away from the screen, and it can continue working and exploring and
Yeah.
so on. So it gives you much more freedom to work on those
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to go back to this kind of focus on profitability and the need for
Okay.
efficiency and operational performance as well, because I think we live in a world where we are seeing this huge global shifts in political stance, in power dynamics, in economic uncertainty. And because of that uncertainty, um, there is a lack of investment
Yeah.
and kind of um, there's a fear of risk, and
Yeah.
uncertainty takes away this courage to act, courage
Yeah.
to explore. So we're moving away from this kind of exploration and innovation to really more preservation and
Yeah.
just exploiting what we're really good at. It creates very, very competitive environments
Mm.
where markets are struggling in many ways.
Yeah.
There's less investment, there is less opportunities. People are not investing and not buying. And as a result, businesses have to focus now again on the bottom line. And
Yeah.
that has a huge implications on how we operate. Again, a lot of companies are letting go a lot of people, and you'll probably experience as well some of these shifts and priorities. And it's being passed on to HR, and people leaders have to make those decisions in terms of resources, in terms of
Yeah.
people, in terms of who should stay and who should go. And then AI and this whole automation is being used to drive the productivity and efficiency. But the problem is that if we don't invest that alongside with developing human potential,
Yeah.
AI and technology is allowing us to scale. But the question is, what are we scaling?
Yeah.
If we don't invest in that human capacity, we are actually scaling inefficiency, right? We are
Yeah.
scaling things that no longer work. So it is important to recognize that we do have to look into how we operate and what exactly we are scaling and become much more dynamic in our ways of working. The whole decision making is no longer coming from top down and just filtering through the layers. It's actually looking at opportunities, looking at new ideas, looking at new creativity options, and exploring per project basis to see what new realities we can create. So in that, adaptability and resilience from human perspective are much more valuable resource
Mhm.
than specific hard technical skills, right? Because you have
Mm.
to be able to think on the spot, react to
Yeah.
whatever is happening in a moment, and actually have courage to act without having all the data, without having all the information, without necessarily having the certainty of what's coming next. But in a way, that is an opportunity for us to shape that reality, right? This is a messy um, in between space that gives us opportunity to shape it on our terms and how we want to work.
That's so true. And I'll add to that that when we talk about profitability, all we see is a balance sheet, right? And we talk about the financials. Actually, we are talking about profitability from a are we profiting in a health and well-being kind of sense to some of the comments that we've got in the chat, right? So we can't just keep talking about profit as this zero-sum financial gain. Clearly, that's important because we need to be viable. But I think we're increasingly starting to see correlation and even some causality that says if we're not well as an organization, we're hampering our profitability whether we like to admit it or not, if you've got high attrition, if you've got bad reputation, if you're not good on capability. So I think we need to expand the term profitability to think about the things that you just said. Because let's just say if we as humans are quite profitable on our adaptability and resilience, guess what? We'll perform better and we'll help drive better financial profitability for the organization, just non-profit operating costs, or whether that is for profit to appease shareholders. So I think we've got more evidence now, Evelina, that backs that up, that performance isn't just that you punish people to perform and you dispose of them. You have to create a renewable sense and a balanced sense in order to focus on profitability as an actual sustainable thing. We've seen companies who have kind of hit the wall, Brewdog being a very relevant example right now, right? Where actually their reputation completely suffered because of their wellness and harassing behavior, accusations, and so on, to the point the brand suffered, to the point the profitability suffered. So this stuff matters. We've just got to be really hot on making sure we balance that conversation out and don't just obsess about money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking back at that last point of search for meaning and purpose, this is the time where we are actually questioning why we even doing this. Why are we in this role? Why are
Yeah,
we working for this specific organization? So each individual is questioning. Again, in general,
yeah,
people want meaningful work. We no longer just
yeah.
want to come in for money. People want to feel like they belong. Again, we are so disconnected in all of this
Mm,
technology-filled world that we want to know that we
mm,
matter. We know that we're making a
yeah,
difference. So that bigger picture of where
mm,
are we going and what bigger vision and
yeah,
mission am I contributing here is really, really important. So as each person is
mm,
questioning that, it's important that organizations are
mm,
also questioning this as well and saying, what is our changing role in the
yeah,
market? How are we adding value to the
yeah,
world, to the people, to whoever are you serving, right? As an organization.
yeah.
So it goes back to that. And if you are serving the purpose, if you're creating meaningful work for people, then that will lead to profit. And I also
Mm.
like, Perry, that you most of the time when you talk about profit, you don't actually use the word profit, you talk about prosperity, right? And I really, really like that because
Prosperity, yeah,
it's so much
yeah,
more than just bottom line, right? It's a long-term
yeah,
sustainable investment in which profit plays a big part
yeah,
of, but it's this kind of long-term sustainable
yeah,
vision of what is good for the business, what is
yeah,
good for people, and what is good for all the
yeah,
communities that those organizations or people serve, right? Um, okay.
for
Any
sure.
questions
Yeah.
anyone has on what we're discussing? Any other topics that you'd like us to kind of dive into? Um, Anna mentioned that it would be interesting to dive
While
into
people are doing that,
inclusion and well-being as well.
yeah, while
Yeah, go
people are doing
Perry.
that, Evelina, there's just one thing people might be pondering, which is, well, that sounds great, but how do I enact that? Because like people at the top don't listen, they don't want to know. So you really do have to take this nearer to yourselves and your teams and kind of conduct a bit of an experiment yourself. And you can contain it. You don't have to tell anybody about it, but you can track things like mood, morale, absence, wellness, stress levels, or whatever by just talking to people and kind of ranking it, just so that you've got some data. And then look at your performance vapor trail. So kind of go, when did we perform well? Oh, look, that's when we weren't so stressed out, when we were a little bit more self-contained and we were looking after and so on. And then when things got a bit hot and we fragmented, look, actually performance went off. It went down a bit and we struggled. So I think there's something about almost like your own seismic survey that you can do within a team just to sort of check this out. And then you've got something to people and say, look, we've create a pattern here. This is important. What do you think? And see if you can escalate it that way. Because just knocking on the door saying, shouldn't we do this morally? They'll go, yeah, 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 but they won't change. But if you can show them some of the almost hampering effects, you might start people going, oh wow, what are we doing here? That's really not good. So I think a little experiment contained and measured gives you a stronger case to get a bigger push up to get people to listen. who make
Yeah,
decisions.
absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think this highlights the importance of where the shifts are happening with inclusion, belonging, and
yeah,
well-being initiatives. And we can
yeah,
see that a lot of these kind of superficial tick box exercises and
yeah,
some of the perks are actually being removed because as
mm,
our bottom line is being squeezed, and we are questioning the meaning, why we're doing this, how we're getting there, there is no space anymore for initiatives that do not have a clear
yeah,
value add. And any initiatives that we are putting forward now, there's so much greater importance on highlighting what difference does it make and how does it translate to sustainability of the business long term, right? So we need to evidence that these things that we are doing that are good for humans will actually
yeah,
translate to
yeah,
performance at organizational level.
yeah,
If we can map that out, we will not
mm,
receive that investment in that initiative. So there is
yeah,
really that shift in the importance of what data you are collecting. And that data, like Perry said, it's not always just hard stats. It's also
mm,
people's stories, levels of
yeah,
stress, um, sense of safety and
yeah,
level of engagement that people are having with the workplace, and are they believing in where this business is going and so on, right?
yeah,
So it is very, very important that we look at the sense of belonging and we look after people's well-being and health because it is imperative
mm,
to that business performance.
mm,
But more than ever, now we need to demonstrate that, and we need to
yeah,
have clear stories, data, and information to showcase how exactly that translates to. I'm not going to say bottom line because there's so
yeah.
much more
Prosperity.
to the value add to the business, but how does it add value to the business, right?
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so Perry, you have
Yeah,
mentioned this, and I know people will find this very, very interesting.
yeah,
Doing a lot of work on these polymorphic organizations, and as we're
yeah,
talking much more about the need to respond in a dynamic way
yeah,
in
yeah,
response to this
yeah,
chaos in which we operate,
yeah.
talk us through this and tell us what this really means.
Sure. There's a Substack page that I've created and a flow of articles you can go to. So I'll put that in the chat while I'm talking so that you can go to it. But I've been pondering this for a long time, Evelina, just how much turbulence and change attempts, right, are wearing us out, wearing us thin. So I thought, why is that? And it's like, well, yeah, the organizational constructs, the org design, and the way we, create roles and decision making and spans, it all feels a bit brittle. So at the first point of contact, it kind of fractures, and they have to keep repairing it, and it feels really, really tiring and hard work. So I thought, well, what happens in nature particularly, and that's where this partly came from, but also in technology, where technology isn't brittle, it's adaptive, and nature isn't always brittle, it's adaptive. And this concept of polymorphism came out. So it really says that an organization has enough strength to hold itself firm, but enough adaptability that when it needs to, it doesn't break. It can absolutely shift to how it needs to be. It's really conceptually difficult to grasp that an organization can do this. But my research and probing found that lots of organizations have got pockets of polymorphism anyway for areas that are high volatile, they surge, they dip, they're very complex, they've got long tails or short tails. So I'll give you an example in some of pharma industry. They've taken a lot of the sort of funneled and hierarchical R&D teams and created big capability pools of people who can work on surge-based things and kind of go to hotspots. And so they have a job still, but they don't belong in a function. They're very adaptable and can be put into work situations where the heat's on or where the opportunity is there. And I thought there's more of that organizations can do. But why don't they do that now? Well, A, they're kind of a little bit seduced by the power of hierarchies and stuckness anyway, because it's familiar, as you said. But B, they just don't believe it's possible because there's always a data lag in organizations. The data they get is what happened in the past. And what we want is a kind of real-time feed that says, right, here's where we've got to adjust. Now, with AI and automated and digital technologies, we should be able to do that. We should be able to have hot dashboards that say, look, this is your peaking, troughing, overstressed, undervalued, underloaded. And then maybe we can make more tuning decisions about how we reshape an organization. So that's the concept of polymorphism. It's the kind of best of those adaptive, flat, non-hierarchical organizations, but also with the rigidity and the strength that comes from the legacy strand governance, perhaps, or safety or something that exists now. So it doesn't abandon the hierarchy, it just like metamorphosizes it so that it's more pliable and so on. So yeah, that's the concept I'm working on now. And the good news is a lot of the things we've built over the last 20, 30, 40 years, even, so think some of the total quality management stuff, still has a part to play in our future. It's just adapted. So I think we are in a position where we can kind of recombine things rather than have to reinvent something or invent something completely new. So that's what that work's all about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what I like about this as well, that it allows us to repurpose what we already have in a new
Mm,
ways, right?
yeah,
So it's not
yeah,
necessarily creating something out of nothing. It's actually looking at all
mm,
of the things that you already have and how
mm,
can you utilize it differently. So in
yeah,
practical terms, we're looking at human-centric approaches, right? We're looking at
yeah,
ecosystemic dynamics. We're looking at
sure.
how it's like all these different cogs that you have at the same time, and if you tweak
Yeah,
one, what happens to another one, and how it affects all of the other things in a system. So it's really finding um, these anchor points that make the biggest difference and identifying where the biggest risks are, what are the biggest opportunities, and how can we make sure that we are tweaking those cogs in whatever direction that needs to happen and measuring the systemic effects that it have. What does it mean for people? What does it mean for our business performance? What does it mean for our bottom line, right? So
yeah,
we no longer have to think in boxes. We really have to look at how each piece of data and each piece of information, each
yeah,
process that we have, what is the relationship of that small piece with everything else in the system? And if we
yeah,
allow ourselves to open up that broader view, we
yeah,
will find some things that we can tweak, improve, and most of the time it's
mm,
much simpler than we think. It's just having enough
yeah,
information. And again, we can use AI nowadays to filter this information in and to allow
yeah,
us to pull out some of these priorities and risks and the impacts that one part has on a bigger system. So it's really, really
yeah.
exciting work.
Good.
And there's a
Thank
lot
you.
that can be done to work
Yeah,
with this. So yeah.
thank you. Cool.
Okay, so what does it really mean for humans? Let's go back to people, right? And what does performance even mean? I think performance is really changing in terms of the
Mm,
expectations of what is expected out of us. And we are still afraid of replacement
yeah,
and thinking that we just need to get rid of people and we're going to be replaced by machines. But what we're really looking here is actually at individual enhancement and even beyond that, the entire workforce augmentation, where you are not just expected to be better, but actually you're expected to deliver much more, and your ways of working are um, hybrid in a way that you work with AI as a colleague, as your thinking partner, as your sounding board, but yet your final decision making, the direction, and accountability of why we are doing this and what is the difference that we're going to make still stays with you. So it's a huge, huge opportunity for people to own their best skills and for businesses as well to explore things that before we couldn't invest in because it costed too much. It was too much time, too much resources. And now we can just churn some of those ideas and pilot things in a very, very quick way. So in chase for the cost and efficiency of productivity, there are a lot of people processes that are being replaced with automation. But what this also means that it creates a huge opportunity to create some premium where real, genuine human touch is still there, right? So obviously, it's so much cheaper to have AI bot answering your questions, but if there is a real human on the phone, talking you through, helping you solve problems, it is a premium that you can charge on your products and services. So it's shifting away as technology is becoming cheaper and more efficient. It's the human touch that's becoming more premium. So we really need to make sure that we are building that capacity and we're building that human touch and human approach in our businesses, and we are not just neglecting and replacing it. Um, with that, we also see that there is a huge cognitive overload, and a lot of people are being disconnected from why am I even doing this? Is my work will still going to be here? Um, what really matters? And people are still keep plowing, keep delivering things, but in a way, not even believing in things that they deliver. So there is a risk of really creating that workforce that is not engaged because again, technology is taking away some of that vision and bigger picture and that human touch of saying, this is why we exist, this is what we are trying to do, and this is the direction where we are going. So in face of this fear and uncertainty and chaos, the way to lead through that is to give people something to believe in, right? Something that maybe doesn't even exist. And for me, the definition of a leader is actually a person who inspires people to believe in something that doesn't even exist yet.
Mhm.
So it brings people together to make it happen and to create that in reality, right? So there are these risks as well that as we become more effective and more productive by utilizing technology in a better way, there are going to be a lot of other people who are actually struggling to keep up, and the expectations for performance will rise, right? If one person is delivering X, you will be expected to deliver that too. And if some other people are not tapping into the technology and not knowing how to maximize their potential, they will be left behind. So, as HR, we really need to make sure that we're actually empowering people in utilizing that skill set. So, we're not just investing in technology, we're actually investing in people's ability to make the most out of that technology and do it in a context of meaningful work, of purposeful direction to say, like, this is where we're going, and this is how you can explore that. So the demand for imagination and to be able to reflect on that big picture and to set that direction becomes even more important. And leaders are no longer just managers delivering results. We are seeing much more of these entrepreneurial ways of working where you're operating under uncertainty, where you are testing it all the time, where you are iterating on the spot, where you need to have courage to act without necessarily having all of the data and information. So, in a bigger organizations, you could kind of call this intrapreneurship, as it is innovating within that environment, but it's kind of high uncertainty, high volatility, and constant iteration without having all of the stats, data, and business plan. It's more about, okay, this is the idea, this is something that I believe in, and this is how I need to inspire people to apply all of their best skills and imagination, reflect on where we're going, and find a way to make it happen by using technology to get there faster.
Well, can I just add a couple of points on that then, which
Sure.
is the cognitive overload and disconnection is rife, and I am now seeing people realise that they can sort of use, and I'm doing it myself actually, they can use some of this technology to help with cognitive overload. So, as an example, I've built a couple of scripts into my use of ChatGPT, where a couple of crucial newsletters I get, which have a lot of links to a lot of articles, I get it to go off and read them, and I've given it a context for it to come back and say, this is what I found that I know you're going to be interested in. But I've also asked it to say, tell me about things that I've not told you I'm interested in, just in case I'm interested in them. So it gives me a couple of randoms too. That's shaved about an hour and a half off my weekend reading because it helps me direct my effort towards what I want to. So that's an example where you can sort of help solve some of the cognitive overload issues. But there's also the cognitive overload that people are feeling when they're being asked to almost like sort of scope their work to be automated. They're like, well, you're just asking me to make myself completely irrelevant. And I've seen some lovely examples where people say, no, we want you to do that because that's efficiency. But the trade-off is you get to choose where you take some of your available capacity next. So we're not going to get rid of you. We're going to see what you want to do and what you can do above and beyond what you're currently engaged to do. Now, that's a really quite appealing proposition. So it needs honoring. I saw that example in a massive, massive call center type environment, literally global type call center environment, where they did that. And they said to people, at the same time as giving you AI capability, we're going to give you emotional intelligence training so that you can better support customers. And they all liked it, but actually customers loved it. So the NPS went up. And as the NPS went up, they won more clients because they were really good at handling customer queries. So you can see how this stuff can have an economic plus, that you don't have to look at it as a reductive game, but people are very overloaded by the fact that it looks like you're just trying to get rid of me. So we've got to make sure we counter that if we're sensible. So there are examples where it's going, Evelina, but it's a
Yeah.
very tricky field to navigate right now.
It is, and I think it can be scary and it is exciting at the same time because
Mm,
it gives us opportunity to explore our edges, to lean into our strengths, to build on
mm,
things
yeah,
that allows us to add value in a way that we couldn't have done before. So
yeah,
if our tasks, repetitive things that we don't like, can be replaced and automated, like you say, it gives us time and freedom to explore what else is
mm,
there, how else I can add value. And that's the way we're supposed to be thinking. And
yeah.
you have this, Apple tagline, which is probably supposed to be a tagline of the
Mhm.
century, and says think differently, right?
Yeah.
This is just so much more
Mm,
important right now because everyone can churn some content, and we know that already. Our social media and articles and everything are filled with kind of the sameness
mhm.
of the AI generated content and solutions and
Yeah,
products and apps and so on. So the way we build a competitiveness is by thinking differently, and it's the
yeah,
dreamers, it's the weirdos who
yeah,
who
yeah,
believe that they think they can change the world, and they will do that, right?
yeah,
So it's those people that will create new demand for our businesses, will create new possibilities. So we
yeah,
really want to give you hope that actually it is exciting if you know how to
yeah.
tap into this, and if you just give ourselves freedom to dream, freedom to imagine new possibilities. I mean, everything in our world, everything that exists around us, planes and light bulbs and the screens at which you are now watching this conversation, right? It first existed in somebody's head as an idea,
Mm, mm,
right? And
mm.
we are losing that capacity to imagine new things. So we really need to go back to this kind of childlike state where we believe that anything is possible and you can imagine this, because you can then tap into technology to explore why and how can we really make this into a reality, and what resources we need to pull in to make it happen. So it is really exciting, and anyone can lead these days. Anyone can be a
Mhm.
leader in inspiring people, in creating these new possibilities and exploring new ideas and new possible realities. So we really hope that you can tap into that potential. Okay, so Perry,
Yeah.
again, so here you're looking at, okay, so what does performance mean in the context of these polymorphic organizations? So do you want to talk us
Yeah, sure.
through that?
Yeah, it isn't just polymorphic, but it kind of gives us a sense that actually the more we want to get an adaptive organization, the more we've got to confront some things which we hold as true, but they're absolute built on sand. And it kind of echoes Mark Carney's speech at Davos when he talked about the world order. He said it's a bit of a pretend, really. It's not as strong as we think it is. And I think that's what's going on in performance. So, first point on here, performance is poorly defined and measured right now. What we currently think is performance are largely what are called proxies, because we try and measure things with a very subjective view of like an individual who's a line manager and an individual who's a job holder to kind of rate themselves. There's a ton of research that says that is so flawed, biased, and inaccurate, but we rely on it so much. We've got to bust a few myths here, and that's one of them, that we can rely on objective human evaluation. No, we can't. It's absolutely terrible and it distorts things. At best, it has modest reliability. But you think how much we anchor people's career choices and performance measures on those subjective views. So we've got to, in that respect, and the CRPD have done some research as well on the limitations of this. Actually, it can have an impairing effect on morale and on connections and so on, because it kind of drives this lone wolf, I've just got to get my stats right type approach. And that's not really what performance is about, because it's an aggregation, isn't it? It's a collection. If it was a pattern, it would be tartan. You know what I mean? It's got lots of things woven into it. And what happens is when we say we want to measure this, guess what? We do what we say we want to measure. We don't do other value creating, incidental, and adjacent stuff. So we sort of shut it out and ignore it, and we go straight lines. And then we wonder why things are a bit off. And while we can deal with customer calls really efficiently, but actually they don't rate us very highly because it felt like we couldn't wait to get rid of them. It's like, wow, that's a really bad bounce back effect that comes on that. So let's stop measuring proxies and let's look at real things that we want to measure. And I think the way we do that is we start thinking a little bit more about outcomes. What changed as a result of good performance? We think about quality. How well did we do it? We think about the sustainability of it, like at what cost did we hit that performance measure? And then I think there's something, who did it really help, but who did it hinder? So I think there's a bit more narrative we can bring into that, Evelina. And the second one is exactly where AI sit in. I can remember reading quite a long time ago about the concept of centaur roles, the famous mythical half man, half beast type thing. We're now half person, half AI, maybe, because I think that's what we're going to start to look at is that work schedules or roles, if we've got them, we're going to look at what can we automate, what can we almost use to augment. Both the technology and the human kind of have an interplay, but the human ultimately has the arbitrary, almost like brief on it. Then what can the technology accelerate, but we still have a final gate decision on whether we can put that through. And then I think there's something in there about how we kind of bring it all together and aggregate it so that we know we're doing the right thing with the tools that we've got, so that we've got this whole sense that we kind of hand off between us. We let the AI thing help us with things we didn't know about that we want to do something with, and we know what we want to do something with, and we get the AI tool to help and deploy it in its best possible way. So I think we're seeing that already. I think we're getting very comfortable with that. And then the third point I think is really important. AI does give us the chance to get away from that proxy and really understand what's going on with performance by having such a forensic approach to data fields and so on. We already know there are tools that say we can crawl all over Microsoft Teams and your inbox and tell you where you're wasting time, where we can help you more. But people kind of suddenly feel a sense of surveillance on that, going, oh my goodness me, literally my every move is being monitored. And we know from mouse movement related technology and remote workers that that's just a complete farce, because when you've got that surveillance thing, it backfires. We feel tense and under pressure, and we don't perform as well anyway, and we hack it and find a way around it. So we've got to get this participative sense of how we want to use AI to help us really know what performance looks like for both the individual benefit, the team benefit, the organization benefit. It can't just be an organizational, like introduced creeping kind of thing, because that will make us think of the Matrix and Keanu Reeves and so on. To your point, let it take the work that we want it to take, but actually let's think about what we really want to preserve, which is this kind of dignified, creative, human, compassionate, empathetic, really responsive human skills and so on. And we know from lots of research, customers love it, colleagues love it. When we can be more relational, it does create a social fabric that's very strong, and we get a collective sense of resilience. We get fortitude, which is that strength we draw from each other. So let's think about what human value looks like, and let's make it in a really, really nice narrative and impact-led way. And then the final point is quite a big one, but it comes from some research that Laszlo Bock, former VP of HR at Google, put together, where he said, I'm seeing some patterns. Flattened performance. He says if people can augment themselves with AI, they can almost look as good as somebody who's got years of experience, because the AI is kind of helping them perform to a level that they could only imagine after years of experience and so on. And it is accelerating. I think I said this before. The curve between I don't know something to I know something now is seconds, not weeks. But we still aren't competent at it. But we can know things a lot more quickly and contextually because we can get the bot to help us out. So that gives us a sense of something. But the pipeline risk is a human quality thing, Evelina, because some research on Gen Z, and I'm not really overly hooked on the generational differences, but a certain age group showed absolutely no intent on becoming a manager in the current shape or form. So we've already got potentially a massive manager gap looming with people who just don't want to do that. So traditional roles and pipelines into expertise and so on, we need to think differently about. So there's a performance element to that as well, because as experience kind of ages and disappears from the work environment, how do we replace that? Because not all of that can become indexed in a large language model. So how can we think about creating different ways that we can service a kind of pipeline feel so that people feel like they've got progression and development and stretch and so on. So that's a big old dump of a load of things I've been sort of tabulating about performance. But I think the crucial thing is we've got to stop believing that we're measuring performance because we're not measuring proxies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what really performance means have to be really rethought and
Yeah,
reimagined. And what development means, what people development, what training means, also have to be completely reinvented because,
totally.
like you say, it's not anymore about that linear career progression. We are talking about completely different skill set that is required to lead people, to lead
Yeah,
teams, and to lead actually hybrid teams, right? If
yeah,
you're leading a team of human colleagues and AI agents, right? It requires a very, very different skill set and capacity to make work work.
yeah,
And then individual development is not necessarily that linear progression. It's not hierarchical progression. It's not necessarily going, from expert to a manager. It's really in role development and personal growth. And people are
mm,
actually looking for more feedback. They are looking for more improvement in how can I become a better human? How can I become a better expert? How can I work in a way that is actually make my life better, right?
yeah,
People want more freedom, more autonomy, better lifestyle. It's no longer about just chasing the career opportunity.
yeah,
It's actually looking that I matter, I belong, I contribute to the bigger picture that is meaningful and purposeful, and I believe in, wanting to be part of that future that you believe in, and having support to overcome your own challenges and to develop your own strengths. And AI can really help with that. I don't know if you have seen as well, let's say like ChatGPT even has now year in review.
mm,
You can also have options where you can ask them to review um, your you know, entire library of conversations that you had with them so far and give you pointers on your self-development, on your weaknesses, on your strengths, on opportunities for development, but also opportunities for leaning into areas where you can add value in maybe areas of work that you have never thought that's
yeah,
possible. So we can really utilize the technology to give us back more information, and like you say, there is a risk of us being monitored, being watched. So it is important that as well in workplaces, we actually set some guidelines and ethical standards and knowing what to share, when to share, and what information is being used back for training, but also knowing how we can benefit from that information. So if we are giving that information somewhere into that system, what is the value that we're getting back? Because there is a value of sharing our personal data, right? And even, when we think from kind of like marketing perspective, if I'm browsing for a new watch, yeah, it's fair enough. I do want to see some options for watches that are available. But as soon as I bought that watch, I don't want to see those ads anymore, right? So I want that technology to know that actually I've bought it already, right? I am already now working on something else and looking for something else. So So how do we create these filters of feedback when we know that this is what I've been working on, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm no longer interested in, what is the next for me, what are the opportunities for development, and create those feedback loops where we're actually benefiting from the data that we are sharing with the systems that we are using. So it is very, very important to have these standards and guidelines for how we're
Mm.
using it. Okay, so when we look at kind of people performance, and we always say that, oh, people are our greatest assets. But are they always? And there is really a continuum where if we don't look after people, they are not our assets. They're actually a liability, right? So if we have huge turnover and sickness and absence costs, if we have business compliance breaches and fines because of human mistakes and errors, if we have low people performance and people are just showing up, but they are not delivering and it affects our profit, if we cannot deliver our shareholder returns because of that, then people are not our assets. They are liability. They're creating business risks. At the best, somewhere in the middle, people are our costs, right? We give something to people, we pay for their time, they deliver some outputs, but it's really kind of this kind of tit for tat where we feel like there is a competition of resources, right? What we can take from people and how much they give, and it's a kind of fair balance. But when we're looking at people as assets, this is where people are actually generating value for the business, where people are translating their work into clear brand value and credibility and new products and profitability and maintain that sustainable growth of the business. So innovation comes from people, right? The brand character usually comes from authenticity of people. Profit line comes from efficiency of your people and their ability to utilize the technology and deliver value at lower cost than what it's costing the business, right? So for us as HR, we really need to start thinking, how do we turn our people into assets? Because we are still sometimes thinking as protecting, as the role of HR is to protect business from people and protect people from the business, right? So it's more of this kind of risk management and kind of performance intervention where things are already gone too wrong, and now we are just kind of managing risks and legal liabilities, where we really need to take 10 steps back and look at how can we be proactive and preventative and how we can build and develop our people into assets. So in that, what is that new role of HR? And I'm putting here new in brackets because I know that many of you are already doing this amazing work. And there is always been this reward for HR and potential to really be more strategic, more proactive, more empowering. But a lot of people could have gotten away with much less. So when we look at traditional HR and the qualifications and education of HR as an industry, it's it's very administrative, very legal, very reactive department in some ways, right? And we reflect on the data that we already have. We have this individual approach where we just support people where they struggle and kind of intervene only where things are affecting and damaging the business. And now we need really different approach. We really need to step up and look at how can we be much more proactive in driving that human performance and kind of shifting that needle from that previous slide, right, away from people are just risks to how can we really develop them into assets. Um, Administration can be taken away by AI completely, right? We don't need to be doing any admin or anything that we don't want to be doing. So it gives us an opportunity to step up and own a much more strategic role. And a big problem with HR as well, if you look at kind of career progression, now we know that HR is very female field. Nearly 90% of professionals in HR are women. And yet, when we look at the board and executive levels, they are mainly men. And there is a huge disconnect here that is nothing to do with our gender differences or our gender weaknesses or inequalities and so on. It's actually got to do with the way how field of HR operates, that it's not strategic enough, it's not predictive enough, it's not empowering enough to give us a seat at the table at the board, right? So utilizing AI can really give you an opportunity as a professional to really step up and take that role that is empowering performance, that is much more setting that strategic direction, looking at building the human capacity to drive business performance. And we're not just looking at data. We need to be generating new meaning. What does it mean for the future of the business? What does it mean for people? What does it mean for the teams? What does it mean for the structure? And how can we inform the shape of the organization? So we can really have a bigger and louder voice that can give us opportunities for development if we know how to shift our role from these reactive administrative individual approaches to much more proactive, strategic, systemic, empowering way that creates new meaning for our organizations. Um, Perry, anything you'd like to add here? I know you do a lot of
Yeah,
HR department transformation, that you are seeing this and
yeah,
supporting as well a lot of departments and kind of
yeah,
shifting that capacity of HR to be operating in that way,
yeah.
utilizing technology. So, um,
Yeah, there's a big case study on NatWest Bank actually on the CIPD's HR operating model research work, where they did deliberately go for high administrative kind of burden, outsourced to a bot. They even called it Archie, so it had a kind of name. And it did take something like 80% of routine queries away from an HR team that was very overloaded by them. But it also had some unexpected positives in that it allow people to really feel like at any point of the day or night, if they needed an HR related query, like, my child's off sick and I've got a really important thing to do, and what's the policy on that, and so on and so forth, and it would help them out at any time of day or night. So that was good. But also, it gave people the sense that where it escalated it then to a human operator, it clearly was something that was worth talking about and not just going through a process. So people felt like they were getting better decisions and service as a result of that automation. So that was really nice. That was a strong example there. I worked with a client in pharma who had built their own large language model for HR related things. So it looked like ChatGPT. People could type into it and get very uniquely crafted answers. And again, take up was huge and people really, really liked it. And what I loved about it is that that model learned, because if people asked it questions and it didn't have the information to answer it immediately, it kind of banked them and started to build up an additional kind of wave of things that it could do for people based on demand, which I thought was really smart move. So that's where I've seen it work really, really well. And I was in a group of chief people officers yesterday, about 25 of them, who all said we have to automate for two reasons. One is because we absolutely need the capacity. We are fit to burst. There's too much to do. And so therefore we absolutely need to outsource some things that are kind of holding us back a little bit from the things that we really want to do that are higher value and higher quality. And they reported they're seeing people who are AI empowered themselves say, I think I'm due this. I recognize this. I would like to challenge something here. So they're using AI to create a stronger case for some form of recompense. So it almost feels like they're empowered to take on the organization. Now, whether that's right or wrong, we have to face into the fact that people may feel more enabled by using AI to back up their own sense of shortcoming. And that might make a spike in casework if we're not careful, not because that's a bad thing to do, but because people then have the way of things that aren't spoken about now might be spoken about, and that increases the workload. So there's a kind of double whammy on that. And so I think senior HR people are absolutely recognizing this is not just a nice to have to keep up with the bunch, that absolutely elevate the function to all of those things on the right side of your slide there, Evelina. they all want it, and they all feel like they're somewhat held back by a lot of the administrative burden, I guess, that we've now created, because they want to see that they can protect the organization and the people's interests in a better way. And at the minute, they can't. They can only do it administratively. So I'm totally with you about the intent and the execution. And I'm seeing some examples of it, but we've got a bit of an uphill on it because we've
Yeah,
got a lot of data
absolutely.
to sort out
And
first.
again, it's I think
Yeah.
it's our role then to empower people and give them that hope that, that they can do this. This is up to them, because if we don't empower people in the right way, then we're actually creating that gap where few
Yeah.
self-starters with entrepreneurial minds, they
Yeah.
will jump at the opportunity, they
Mm.
will explore this, and the ones who shout the loudest will be the ones who will be rewarded, right? So
Yeah.
it's very important that we actually empower all these other people who are silent and who are maybe not the first ones to start, who maybe need a little bit of a nudge and a little bit more of that psychological safety to explore and play with something different. And if we show them how they can tap into this resource to better themselves and to explore areas differently, that they don't lose out, and they can kind of amplify themselves in a way that is positive, and not be left behind. So it can definitely create um, a lot of risks and exclusion for people who are not being enabled to make the most out of this technology. And again, if we invest in the technology and people are not using it, then it's a huge waste of our
Exactly.
money and resource,
Yeah.
right? So in the
Yeah.
same way, like you can launch new well-being platform or other,
Yeah.
new um, diversity resource and so on. If people are not using it, it's
Yeah.
a waste of money. So we really need to make sure
Yeah.
how can we enable people to
Yeah.
have that. Okay, so how do we then get to the kind of the practical nitty-gritty process of how do we really then design this work that creates this high-performing work environments? Now, my work usually sits at this kind of intersection of human health, mental health, well-being, and performance at human level, performance and organizational level. And I'm always interested in why some people struggle in exactly the same environments that others grow and thrive, right? So there is an individual difference in our levels of resilience. It's individual difference in our ability to cope with change, to step up and create new opportunities out of this stress and chaos and things that happen to us, right? So there's a lot of neuroscience and behavioral change research that looks at, okay, what do we really need to do? What needs to happen at individual level and what needs to happen at that environmental level? And going back to what Perry said at the very beginning of this presentation, where he said that driving individual performance, it's not always individual work, it's actually systemic, because our environment, our systems are always bigger than us. And if you think about this, you can have the most vulnerable person with a history of mental illness and disabilities and neurodiverse conditions, and you name it, person who's just vulnerable and struggling. You can place them in a very well operating, supportive working environment, and that person will thrive. They will deliver, right? And other way around, you can take the person who you think is highest performer, the most resilient, the most innovating. You put them under toxic working conditions. You put them in an environment that is high pressure with no support, with inefficient ways of working. And that person will still end up either underperforming or even burning out eventually, right? Because they will be battling the system that is much bigger than them. So the power of our environment to get the best out of people is really huge. And this is where opportunity lies, that we don't have to think that it's all up to us. And we don't have to put that responsibility on each individual to suddenly become resilient. We need to build systems that maintain that resilience at systemic level. So how do we design these high-performing work environments? Well, we actually start first with understanding human needs and that human capacity that we have. And very often we lack specific skills, we lack specific behaviors and experiences. And our first intention is always to recruit and look elsewhere. But actually, we need to better understand the capacity and the potential that we already have and understand the human needs. So when we talk about human needs, it's actually going back to kind of evolutionary needs, right? What does it mean for us to perform as human beings? Going back to that sense of meaning and belonging and sense of safety, both kind of physical security and psychological safety. Looking at all the aspects of health and well-being. What does it mean to have healthy habits and healthy routines? Are we performing well in all areas of our life? Do we have healthy relationships with food, with people, with work? And really trying to understand your people, because we are all individuals. Every organization is different. People have individual needs, individual pressures, caring responsibilities. So we really need to start by understanding where people are at, how are they feeling, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what is stopping them from being their best, right, as individuals. Once we've done that, we also need to look at, okay, how does our organizational environment provide for those needs? So do we provide for people's individual needs? Do we provide for their health needs? Do we provide for their personal requirements in terms of systems, communications, ways of working, our culture? What is our leadership and management capability? How effective is our communication? How good is our alignment across the organization? So we're looking at kind of alignment between departments horizontally, but also the vertical alignment. Do people at the bottom really see where the board and the top leadership are taking them and can see eye to that strategic direction? And do people at the top really see people's needs, going back to that first point? So if we collect the data to understand what people are going through, what they're feeling, and what do they need, can we be that channel to feed and communicate and really understand what is happening in terms of these kind of human factors, in terms of number one, and organizational factors, environmental factors that get the best out of those humans, that the step number two. When we do that, then we conduct that gap analysis. So is this environment good for our people? Because at the end of the day, we spend so much time at work. Work should be good for us, but is it, right? Is it just source of stress and pressure, and causes us to bring our worries at home and lead us to burnout? Is it really good for us? Is it good for our lifestyles? Is it good for our families? Is it good for our futures? And are these people actually good for our business? Do we have right people in the right place? Are they contributing to make this business, to future-proof the business, right? It's about long-term sustainability of people, and it's about sustainability of the business over the long term. So is the business protecting people, and are people actually contributing to success of the business? So when we conduct that gap analysis, we then identify what are the biggest risks, what are the biggest opportunities, and we just need to choose and design very specific initiatives and interventions to make a difference. And we say kind of design initiatives and interventions, and me and Perry, we often do this work where we kind of come in and understand what needs to happen, do that gap analysis, and propose actions and interventions. But the biggest difference that makes is actually really understanding that if you're using external consultants like us, for example, come in and tell you what happens, that you don't become reliant on us, that we're helping you to build that capacity internally to become better, to perform better, right? So it's really about building that human capacity and building that organizational capacity, and just having that external point of view to come in and look at it, and see what is the direction, what are the biggest opportunities to invest in. And then finally, measuring the impact. With every little action that we do, we need to go back and assess what is the impact of that on that individual, on this human level, and what is the impact of that on that ecosystemic level and that kind of organizational environment. So when Perry talked about this kind of polymorphic organization and all of these different parts that interact with each other, we need to understand what specifically we choose to measure and need to be able to go back and say, is this making a difference for our people? Is it making the difference at organizational level performance? So yeah, Perry, anything you want to contribute to kind of these levels, and also what are specific things that we are measuring at every step of the way?
I think there's almost like a sort of a slice through these, which is that they are big areas to focus on, but it's almost like in each of them, or either a cluster of them, an experiment is the only way you're going to start to build this up, almost like experiments at a time. So if you do want to understand human needs and capacity, don't try and boil the ocean with it. Just do a small scale experiment to get something to then test and then start to build up on. So I think that's what we've got here, I think, is 5 things where you can do small starts that aggregate out. I think that's exactly the message I want to take away, because it's so huge and so overwhelming. You kind of think, where do you start? And the answer is, well, somewhere, but small. So I think there's something like you might be drawn to one or more of these. So create this either adjacent small scale experiment, or take an existing organization as a area as kind of like the host of it, and build that little experiment. And then you can use AI agents and data and performance shifts and so on, just to almost create like an adjacent parallel world. I mean, that's a very polymorphic thing to do, to sort of have a shape shift within a shape that's pretty steady. So I think that's something I'd urge people to do, is have a think about what calls you and where you want to kind of really press hard on, do an experiment and see where that takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think definitely it's so important, like you say, to start small. And especially there is a big difference in what you can do internally and what, let's
Yeah,
say, when we come in externally to kind of do the diagnostics and overview, we have probably much bigger capacity to have a
yeah,
broader overview of things, right?
yeah,
But internally, you actually want to do opposite, and you really want to go
yeah,
narrow and just have
yeah.
one step, one little experiment, and say, okay, what is a specific human need that I'm addressing here? What is specific skill or capacity that I want to build? You want to try to understand a little gap, and then you look at, okay, how are we providing for that at organizational level? What needs to change? And design some of these little change initiatives, experiments, and test the impact. So a lot of small experiments, and also when we engage in kind of organizational change, it is also important to reflect that we don't want to be having too many things happening at the same time. But if you do have the same kind of projects happening at the same time, you want to have one that is just a quick win. You have one that is a short-term intervention, and you have one bigger project that is a long-term, long-scale development. So you're not having 10 short initiatives or 10 big long-term projects. You actually want to stack them, and you always only work on one quick win, one short-term intervention, and one long-term visionary project, right? So this way, you are much more effective and productive in how you're conducting those experiments and how they are feeding into one another.
That's it. We're on
So
time.
there we
44
are.
minutes.
So thank you. So a few more minutes for you to reflect. Any other questions, thoughts, reflections? Feel free to stay in touch. You have our emails here. Feel free to email us if you'd like any more help, any more information. Feel free to book a call as well if you would like to explore a specific issue that you're experiencing in your organization, so we can explore if we can help you. And again, a complimentary conversation with us to dive in deeper and to provide support. So thank you, everyone. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, have a little chat with us if you like. Any questions, any thoughts? And I would be very curious to hear, what are you taking away from this? What was your biggest insight or takeaway from this event, and what you'll do differently?
That's a good question. While people are doing that, I've just put my like one takeaway really, which is we should be obsessed about the performance of the system, not punishing people. That's almost like a strap line you can take away from this, because I think the more we're obsessed about the performance of the system, the less likely we are to atomize it back and put all that weight on individuals, where we ought to be able to have a systemic level of performance that we know individuals are contributing to or not. And so that's something I think I'd like people to kind of keep in mind.
Right, thank you. I see
Okay.
as well the comment about the importance to self-regulate. And I think, I'm a
Mm.
big believer that organizations can be used as workplace interventions to drive human health and human performance. And therefore, we do need to have that emotional self-regulation, that emotional intelligence, the capacity to read the room, right? Which AI will never be able to do, right?
Yeah.
So that emotional field is becoming so much more important, and we need to be developing that capacity in ourselves. That's so self-awareness, self-regulation, and healthy self-expression in our emotions and behaviors. And as leaders, we need to be able to do that for others, right? So we have evolved as human beings to co-regulate with others, but we are introducing all of these boundaries and disconnection through technology where we're not allowing these human spaces to co-regulate, to share our thoughts, to share our emotions, and so on. So we really want you to encourage those human spaces and those human conversations that will help us to regulate ourselves and kind of co-regulate each other.
And
Um,
as asked, are there any AI systems that could be used by the HR department to keep up with new era of AI integration? Good question. I think most of the AI tools that we can use, like Perplexity and ChatGPT and Copilot and so on, you can use and prompt it and get it to start building a kind of bank of evidence for you. But it almost feels like there are a few voices out there who are capturing some of the essence around things like AI and HR. So I'd look at starting point, Josh Bursin. He's doing a lot of work about the integration of AI within HR teams. So, Anna, I'd recommend you that starting point there. Have a look at what Josh Bursin's doing around AI, and he'll probably lead you to some other analysts, people like Ben Eubanks over in the US. So, find some people. They're the ones who will almost connect you to the source of what you want, Anna. So, yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
Great. So it's following people who are doing some of the work, but it's
Yeah,
also looking
yeah,
at organizations that are actually leading in AI transformation and looking at some consultancy
yeah.
work that are leading some of those that can be really, really useful to subscribe. McKinsey have some great insights on kind of transformation of AI and where it's going. Um, Google actually have a lot of free resources on training and upskilling, and they have their kind of entire AI schools, and they have even live webinars and workshops as well that are absolutely free. So definitely have a look at some of their AI development schools and resources and summaries that can be really, really useful. And one resource that I also really like to use is a new app called Hughes. It is developed by the founders of Notebook LM, who then went away and created their own platform. And it is an aggregate of news and information that are tailored specifically for you and presented in a form of a podcast and a discussion. So it could be very, very nice. That's my new favorite way of consuming news these days, and having a summary of information that you can look at industry HR information, and it can summarize it for you in a very briefly way. So
What was it
um,
called, Evelina?
Hughes,
How's that spelled?
Huxe.
H U
So
X
it's
E.
called Hughes app. So I'm just gonna
Oh yeah,
check.
content that exists because you do. I've just found it. I've not heard of that one before.
Yeah, so it is quite new. It's still in beta, so it's nice, insightful tool. So yeah, that's great.
Cool. Great, Evelina. Thanks very much. Gave me a chance to really sort of dive in, and almost like I find these things are almost like they're little totems. You sort of do lots of stuff with AI, and then you kind of bring it into an event like this, and then you go off and do lots more, and then you have to bring it in again, and it's always a different version. So thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone,
Brilliant.
and have
Happy
a
Friday.
wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful weekend. And we'll
Yeah.
speak to you soon.
Ciao for now. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.